So this discussion is on forecasting the future of physical retail. So we have a crystal ball and we have all the answers. We're going to get through it in the next 50 minutes. But what we want this to be is a provocative discussion. So we invited some people that have opinions and aren't afraid to share them. But we also, of course, would like to encourage the audience to get involved. So if we're talking about something and you have an opinion or you think differently, raise your hand. Of course, we've got Jason's in the audience with the microphone. Now, another thing is, typically we would do these discussions with retail brands up here, but as we all know, they're not going to give their opinions because they're worried about the video clip getting out there and saying something. So that's why we didn't put any retailers on this one. So before we get started, I guess want to just do a brief introduction to each person. I'll start with Lee. If you can give kind of a 60-second overview on who Lee Peterson is.
Is that all?
That's it.
Is that all I get?
60 seconds. The clock's starting right now.
Oh,
Actually,
crap.
the clock.
There's the clock there.
All right, there we go. The clock is starting. There we go.
So I'm Lee Peterson. I'm the EVP of Thought Leadership for WD Partners. WD Partners is a company based in Columbus, Ohio. We do everything from strategy and insights, which I will show you later tomorrow morning, all the way through construction management, architecture, and engineering. The core of our business is stores, Walmart, Starbucks, CVS, people like that. And I personally have been in retail. I'm the father of 4. I have been in retail for over 45 years. I was one of those people that, I'm a retail grunt. So I grew up, washing the floors of stores and cleaning the toilets and doing everything. And slowly but surely, they realized the amazing talent I had. And then I wound up at a company called The Limited in Columbus, Ohio, from New York and Chicago. And here I am today.
That was over 60 seconds. I like to call Lee the Oracle of Ohio, especially within retail. I use that as an intro, but I always enjoy having conversations with you because you do kind of have
Thank you, Mike.
a good background. And next panelist is Melissa Gonzalez. If you can give us a little background on yourself.
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Melissa. I am the founder of a brand called the Lionesque Group. We're experiential retail strategists, designers, and project managers. And then in January 2020, we were acquired by a firm called MG2. So we are a global design architecture firm. So I am a principal of MG2, but still lead the TLG brand. And so by being part of MG2, we really touch physical environments. Smallest footprint would be a kiosk. Largest one that I could think of we're working on is 250 acres of master planning into a multi-use environment in Washington. So really trying to utilize that opportunity to put our minds together of what is the future of the way people live and how do we create great environments where people can build human connection.
And last but not least, Simeon.
So I was told whatever time you guys went over, I had to donate back, so I'm going to be quick. Hi, everyone. I work for an investment bank, which makes me scary and boring at the same time. But what I get to do is analyze really everything you all do, and it's a lot of fun. So my job is to analyze the evolution of retail, brands, channels, people, whatever it is. But at the heart of it, I'm supposed to help investors understand your businesses better. So my job is to try and do that as well. So it's a lot of fun. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, that's great. And we wanted to have a numbers guy here who can sniff out all the BS.
And everyone always calls me a numbers guy.
You just got to follow the numbers. All right, so forecasting the future of physical retail. Like I said, we wanted to somewhat make this a fast-moving discussion. And so the current state of retail. First question I would like to ask you, Lee, first. Are we overstored? Which I know is a very general.
Are we overstored?
Are we overstored?
Are we still overstored?
Are we still overstored?
Yeah, we definitely are overstored. And then, I think there's also the classic kind of consultant answer to that, which is...
I don't want the classic consultant answer.
Depends. Like, I guess in dollar stores, we're not overstored. In true experience stores like Meow Wolf, we're not understored. But in the classic, what you would consider a store in a mall, we're definitely overstored. Department stores were overstored. JCPenney's were overstored. Kohl's were overstored. You're kind of that strata of retail to me that is sort of the known strata of retail. We're overstored. The unknown parts, like we just saw the presentation here a few minutes ago, we're definitely understored in that type of, like experience retail, we're definitely understored.
Well, we'll get into that because is that a store? Right? So, meta.
Kind of.
Metaverse.
Are we allowed to
Simeon,
jump in, or are we going?
Yeah. I like, yeah.
So
Just thinking-
my team, who I'm incredibly thankful to, did a really interesting amount of work right when COVID started. And we published a report called "Did COVID Actually Save Retail?" And this was before. This was when everyone heard the word pandemic, thought recession, remembered '08, thought inventories, no spending, it was going to be a disaster. Ended up being the best thing that happened. We looked at store closures versus price elasticity. We found that there's never been a store closure, a mass store closure, that raised EBIT margin.
Okay.
Obviously not dollars, but it didn't even raise the margin. It didn't improve your businesses by closing a mass amount of stores, because go figure, stores are a good thing. On the other hand, if you pull back promotions, we watched profits go through the roof.
Yeah.
And it sounds so obvious, and yet it was such a scary thing to say, because the most obvious thing we do when things are problematic is we close a bunch of stores. So what we started doing, we tried to push this notion of, if you know your revenues are going to be down, find the bad stores. Obviously you have to prune them, but the idea is instead you're not over-stored as much as you're over-discounted.
Over-discount, yeah.
Focus on the brand.
But did you measure footfalls with that at all?
Well, so within that, what we found is that, listen, every time someone opens a store, they say that e-com ends up benefiting, right? That the collective ends up benefiting. It's not cannibalizing, it's clustering. And what we found is by closing the store, the same thing happens in reverse. So it has to be a good store, to your point.
Right.
And what we interestingly found was, if you think about traffic, it was the most stored fleets that actually saw the traffic, right? People don't like e-com, they like convenience. And so magically, if I could be transposed or transported to an aisle of a Home Depot, I'd rather be there than on my couch. But if all you're offering me is convenience, because you're a department store that's within whatever 20 minutes away from the king, convenience is no longer enough. Location alone is no longer enough. And so ironically, if you have 800 stores, you probably have too many. If you have 1,500 stores, you probably have too few.
You know, another
Yeah, sorry, well, I'm going to stop talking.
another factor is Walmart in 2010. Their revenue was, January 2010, was $24 billion. Now it's $500 billion. So where'd that come from? It came from those stores.
Yeah.
Without a question.
Well, I guess the question, I know it's a loaded question to start off by saying, are we overstored?
Yeah, how dare you?
Oh, well, I guess when it comes down to which categories are overstored, I guess maybe we can go, that goes a little bit further. And maybe we don't want to go there. We may offend some people in the audience.
Is it about category or good experience, right? And also just it depends. It's not as much category as there's certain items, I think, today that we know that we can just click to buy, and it doesn't need a sense of discovery, to the point of the conversation earlier of shopping versus buying. Shopping needs stores. Buying sometimes doesn't. Yeah. And so maybe understanding the difference, and then understanding what should take up room per square foot in your store, so that you can lean into the opportunity of building human connection and unlocking that halo effect.
Yeah. So department stores, what is your outlook for department stores 10, 15 years from now?
I mean, I think they'll continue to evolve. I think that there's a mix of leaders that are pushing it in that direction, like a Nordstrom, and then there's disruptors that I think are helping people rethink that, like Showfields and Neighborhood Goods. And I think it's going to continue to evolve a little bit more of like kind of a town center feel, almost the way in which malls did it. And so it's, you know, creating this destination of discovery and purpose, and mixing services with products, and really creating this environment and destination that you want to go to. And I think what's exciting on department stores too is the way in which they're partnering with brands has evolved and will continue to evolve, and that's what's making it more experiential and exciting, and their brand moments that are happening that people are craving.
Who in here gets excited when they go into a department store?
All of you. So I think the answer is that the department store model, the model itself, is dead.
Yeah.
It's dead. So now here I am sitting here with every choice in the world right here at my fingertips, and somebody's going to tell me in New York City that they've curated the best brands possible in every one of their stores all across America. I just don't believe it. I just don't believe it.
I don't think they're all doing a good job at it, but like, have you gone to the Nordstrom in Midtown? I think they're doing a good job at it, but I think there's few that are.
Yeah, I mean, there's anomalies for everything, right? It's a bell curve. I think with just about anything. There's great department stores, I'm sure, like everywhere. Just like there's great malls. Like we have a great mall in Columbus, Ohio, Easton Town Center. But malls in general, I think, are also in trouble.
But which goes to the point within retail of the issue is we can go broad pendulums and we can create broad brushstrokes, and they're rarely true, right? Retail wasn't dead. Retail didn't have its renaissance. It's always somewhere in the middle. And like, the numbers are the part that tells the truth. The fun part of consumer, I like to think analyzing a biotech industry, which is a lot smarter than anything I could hope to do. It's actually really easy because it's so hard.
Yeah.
Assessing and forecasting retail is so hard because it's so easy. Like, we're all consumers before we are our actual job, and we forget that. We anecdotalize things. I mean, people thought Peloton was going to go through the roof because everyone saw 4 vans outside their block, thinking that their block represented the rest of the world, and it didn't. So it's just really interesting when you think about this, where for all the digitally native buzzwords, the hottest brands, the ones that were actually thoughtful and moved, are in Nordstrom. So your point, it's like thinking through what the right relationship is. We did a lot of work on wholesale recently. You and I have talked about it. Wholesale's a phenomenal channel. It was the worst thing you could say, wholesale, because it was a middleman, and middlemen are bad, and fees are bad. They're not. Right? You're paying someone. Would you rather pay your own workforce that's going to be more limited, or pay a Nordstrom who knows what they're doing? So it's like you have to have the right partnership and figure out where to be. And that's why, rather than broad brushstrokes, I think it's the nuance that matters, as everything in life. And finding that partner is the most valuable thing you could do.
I think the difference, though, is I'm going to make, it's kind of like the definition of cool. I'll tell you what's cool. Don't tell me you're cool. I'm going to be the judge of that. And it's kind of like that with brands. If somebody's going to tell me I'm going to curate all these different brands for you, and they have to have the right relationship in order to even do that, in the first place, because the cool brands are like, So I'm going to be the one now. And whether I inherently know that, I don't necessarily physically think I'm going to go get the best brand. I just know what the best brands are for me.
How do you find out where the best brands are from your four kids?
Word of mouth.
He's just so cool. You
He's so
see
cool.
it?
I read way too much. I have young daughters. I have 1,000 friends in retail. I mean, it's just a sort of a beehive of activity.
Well, like I said, you're one of the people that I do call. I'm like, all right, Lee, what's cool out there? So you always kind of have your ear and eyes on kind of what's happening next. Before we move on to the next one, so we're still talking about the current state of retail. Lee, you actually gave a talk on this at RetailSpaces last year about how retail is going local, right? And a lot of it was accelerated, of course, from the work from home or work from anywhere. Especially as we can see now in a lot of the downtowns. Yes, I know their return to office is, I guess, September, right? Everyone's coming back. I don't know where we are. But you think we're going to see a continued shift of more kind of localized retail as opposed to the large, metropolis?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's not only work from home is sort of the turn on, that now I'm at home and I walk around my neighborhood. I don't know if you were here last year, and the whole thing was, there's nothing. I mean, there's nothing. There's very little things in my neighborhood. There's not even like a local somebody who's worth anything. But Express is doing Edit. Victoria's Secret is doing small stores that haven't really talked about yet, 8 or 10 of them, I think, across the country. More and more people are doing smaller stores. And a lot of it, I think, has to do with the fact, pop-ups as well, I think that's just brilliant, like experiential retail. Like a smaller store in a smaller neighborhood for a shorter period of time. The most important period of time when you're going to visit, all of that, I think, makes a lot more sense. And
well, I'd be curious, and it's kind of tough to see, but maybe a show of hands, like retailers here that have changed their kind of strategy of where they're going into based on how, I guess, some of the changes. Do you see you're going more local, or is that, yeah? One guy.
Are you going more local because, and I can't see the company, but are you going more
AT&T? Yeah.
So are you going more local because you already have stores elsewhere? Like, is this a function of, I think, like, there's this interesting, whenever we have a percentage, or it's just, there's a numerator and denominator there, and I wonder this element of a piece there where you go local because you've already tapped out the other side.
So I think what we've had experience in retail, so we're going more local because it makes sense to do so, and because we're able to actually shrink the size of the footprint, we are able to put more distribution throughout the country. So not building a 4,500 square foot front of house allows us to build 3 1,500 square foot front of houses, and it allows us to distribute better and for the same cost. And then when we look at all of those things, we are more convenient to the customer because we are within a 10 to 15 minute. And kind of just talking about the whole shopping versus buying thing, I completely agree with everything that you said. But as a consumer, when I shop now, I shop online first. I go in store to buy. So where, old school retailers, big box, whatever you want to call them, JCPenney's, Macy's, back then people didn't have the opportunity to view online what was available, what was out there. They looked in magazines. Now they can do all that online, and then they can go to that destination shop to actually make that purchase. So I think that's the balance that we live now. People know what they want when they're going in. They're looking for something specific, but they've done all that research online. And so now it's just making sure that once they go to the store, that in-store experience is there and that we have what they want. So that's my 2 cents.
Target too. I mean, Target's, they're very successful with smaller, more local stores.
But I think you ask a good question because it is that network effect is kind of what you're leaning into, right? There are a lot of brands that have gone into local. It's a part of their overall strategy, right?
Yeah.
And it's part of that real estate portfolio that's being created. And there is that network effect to it. So T-Mobile, or sorry to bring up Nordstrom again, it's just in my head, but like when they did local, that was a whole different message to a consumer of we can meet you where you need to be met. It was all about flexible fulfillment, but it was still a brand moment. Pretty much transactional, but thoughtful. And they found that when they opened those locals in an area where there was a rack and a full line, that customer that then interacted in that more localized experience spent 3 to 4 times more with them as a retailer because they had that more purposeful moment with them. So sometimes it's part of the overall strategy. And then I think there's other brands where that might be their only strategy, where they're very purposeful of how they're showing up in the neighborhood. But that is how you build human connection, and that's how you become part of the community, and people are craving that.
I think an interesting question would be if you took someone that was on the early part of their curve of the growth cycle, would they rather have that box would they rather have the big box, the urban center box, the heavy traffic, or would they rather go local first? And my only point is I think everyone in this room is in the business of storytelling. That's what we do. And so sometimes the stories are easier to kind of swallow in the rhetoric than they are in the reality. And so the notion of everyone, the Nikes of the world that are going direct now have a very, very large wholesale business. So they sort of have to go direct. They want to go direct, they have to go direct. I wonder the AT&Ts, are you closing one store to open those 3, the smaller ones, or is it that you already have so many of the big ones? And whoever, right? This is relevant for everyone in the room. And so it's just this interesting thing when we think about the curve, like we can put ourselves along the story, but at the end, would everyone rather get to big and then figure out how to go local, or is the strategy start local?
So I neglected to mention that we asked 2,500 consumers all over the United States, all different age groups, what they would prefer, especially since they have been working at home now. Are they going back to office? Are they not going back to office? We ask all kinds of questions like that. They preferred almost 3 to 1 shopping local than having to get in a car and doing that. We did not ask them about online because I think one of the questions was, what do you shop most? Online? What do you prefer to shop? Stores or online? And online won. It was like almost a 60-40 break by quite a bit. But then we asked them if you're going to go to stores. So consumers spoke. It wasn't just hyperbole. We felt like consumers want to do that. They would rather shop local if they could.
So 60-40 was the survey online versus
Online.
But the revenues don't align that way, right?
The revenue what?
The actual business. Sometimes
Revenue is still
surveys,
store.
like when
what
people
you're saying.
answer, well, at the end of the day, the numbers don't necessarily bear that out very often. So if you ask me, would I rather be?
If you take gasoline,
Yeah.
restaurants, what's the other big one? Automobiles out of there. It's getting close. I mean, Mickey Drexler, I watched Mickey Drexler on a video, I don't know what, like 5 or 6 years ago when he was still important. And he said that
Mickey's still important.
he was with J. Crew, so it had been a long time ago. But he said something to the tune of like, online is my best store. I do almost 50% of my business right now. And that was like 5 years ago. There's 50% of his business specialty retail online. So again, I mean, it's various categories that are doing much more of it. Big box stores for physical retail is still the thing and a much higher percentage.
So I want to move on to the next thing. So we talked about the current state and then going into evolving physical retail. So of course, we talked about it earlier today, and we've been talking about it for forever, I think, integrating digital and physical, which can mean a lot to this audience, right? We've got Walgreens, AT&T, Orange Theory Fitness, banks, I mean, that means different things to this audience, but kind of traditional retail, who's doing it well? I guess, who do you think is, I could put you on the spot.
For integrating digital and physical?
Yeah, integrating digital and physical.
Yeah, I cross the spectrum. I mean, I know there's some people from Nike here in the audience, but I think they continue to do it well. I think then everybody has the same starting point, though, so it's not like a fair cookie cutter answer either, right? I think for somebody like a Nike, they can leverage this super active in-app audience that's already accustomed to engaging with them in that way. And so to integrate that into the in-store experience is seamless compared to maybe another retailer who doesn't have that active audience. And so I think it's that. I think companies like Sephora are getting better at it and bringing in, skin analysis and really answering the pain points that you have at that moment of trying to figure out how do I get the best product for myself. And then they seamlessly integrate the online, offline, where I can go into my account. I always remember my past purchases, what I liked. If that's out of stock, it'll then try to recommend another product while I'm standing there in the store if I can't have somebody help me. And so those are two examples that I would give, and both of them are really purposeful about the use of technology, which I think is key. It's a tool at the end of the day, but if it's not, furthering my already natural behaviors and serving a purpose for a pain point that I can't have solved otherwise, then it's not as successful.
Yeah. Does any other brands come to Simeon?
Well, I think Melissa's dead on. I mean, I think at the end of the day, Warby does a phenomenal job at meshing the two. TJX does a even better job at meshing the two because they know that for them, the answer is to not do it.
I was going to say, wait,
So you
I missed something? What's TJX doing?
So you have a TJX of the world, which is drastically bigger business.
Of course, yeah.
And they say that their customer meaning the brand, much more so than their customer meaning the person walking in the door, wants to invisibly move units. So they've made a decision to say that our business is going to be very large and very profitable because we don't have e-com, not in spite of it. So I think it's that point. It's like in and of itself, it's got to be a weapon. You have to target the weapon.
But do you think TJX can hold on to that for much longer?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah?
Oh, yeah. I think that increasingly, especially in this direct world. So the work that I referenced, and I will not take a lot of time on this, but the work that I referenced, we found that as big brands pivoted to direct, they did not see a relative increase in revenue, gross margin, operating margin, or EBIT dollars. Like all four of those things, I said them quickly. They were all mind-blowingly controversial. It was a 2-week report that became a 6-month report. It's a lot of fun.
Okay.
The one that didn't make sense to me the most was the gross margin comment. I mean, that's just math. That should be better if you sell your sweater at your website versus at Kohl's. You should obviously make more money on it. But relatively, we didn't, and I've got a lot of hypotheses, and I would love to, anyone who has them, please, would love to hear your version of the answer later, because I don't have a good one. But I think a big part of it is going to be as brands pull, as Nike goes differentiated retail versus undifferentiated retail, I think people are losing some of the benefit of having scale. I think that's the oversimplified version of my working hypothesis. And so what I think is happening is I think brands are removing themselves not from undifferentiated versus differentiated, but from visible versus invisible retail. I think for every brand pulling a unit out of a department store, I think you walk into a TJX and you still find that they're an outlet for a lot of brands that say they're not selling there. And so this ability to move pallets and have them just disappear, and I remember talking to a CEO of a large brand that I won't name because might be in the room, it was they move things. They need to move 900 units. They'll just drop them in 3 seconds. They'll be gone. 3 of these in 300 stores, and they're out.
That's interesting.
So I just think as brands pivot to direct, I think the ability to move things invisibly is increasingly more important.
The ability to move things invisibly. There we go.
We've done 2 different sets of research on we asked consumers, like, we gave them 15 different choices. What kind of technology would you like to see in stores? What kind of integration of technology? And the first one we did was BOPIS, Buy Online Pickup Store, by far. We did it 6 years before it was big, and we did it again because we thought it was wrong. But that's all I wanted to see is like, I want to press something online and I want you to have it. I don't want you to put it in my trunk, by the way, which was the second test, was like, where do you want it? We want it in the trunk. So basically they wanted to avoid the store.
But we've done similar research, and I think it's not necessarily they want to avoid the store, but what is the utility technology serving for them? What is the highest value it's delivering? It's convenience. And so in that example, it is about convenience. I know what I want. I want to make sure if I'm going to spend my time to drive there, you're going to have it.
Got the kids in the back.
Right. It doesn't mean there's not another opportunity maybe that they could opt into where it's here, it's ready for you. Because you bought that, we also have this, should you want to come inside. Like, there is an upsell opportunity that can happen, but if you're delivering on convenience in general, like what they value most, then they're going to have a gratifying
And I think
experience.
that's a great point, because I think what the consumers are looking for, and they have spoken with the numbers that I talked about with Amazon before. Hey, we want the stuff. We want the stuff on time. I want to press a couple buttons. I want you to have it. I want you to bring it to me. I mean, these are all factors that are just easily replicable by any retailer now. They can do any of those things. So if you can do those things, I mean, some of the solutions are the simplest possible things. Like BOPUS is just bring it to my car is basically all it is.
Well, what both of you are talking about is using data. So what's so interesting is forever we've been hearing the DTC narrative, the digitally native narrative, has been data's better than anything. 1P data is worth the world. And yet the largest brands, largest businesses are all 3P, right? I mean, like literally the largest brand. They don't get any of the data. They don't complain about iOS changing because they figured out a way to sell billions of dollars without it. Using the data, right? Having the data is one thing, figuring out how to use it is the other. And I think we're oddly enough, we've got a ton of data and we're just on the verge of figuring out how to actually use it.
So I want to shift over to a thing that I know you'll want to jump on this, but I'm going to throw it to Melissa first.
Oh, okay.
Is piloting and testing new formats.
Yeah.
Pop-up stores, showrooms. Why are retailers not doing a lot more? I mean, it seems that, that's what the consumer wants. I know that there's research out there that they want to do it. What do you think is the reason why a lot more retailers are not, doing more pop-ups or showroom stores? I know there's two different types.
Very different. I think, well, a couple things. One, I think what the pandemic allowed or enforced was brands, especially those with more national footprint, to reevaluate their portfolio. What is profitable? What isn't profitable? Where should we close? Where should we lean in? And then also recognizing just because we're closing in some markets doesn't mean that there isn't a reason for us to be present in those markets at key times of the year. Insert pop-up shops. So that's an opportunity to be present when it's relevant. New product launches, new partnerships, highly seasonal businesses. The second thing the pandemic helps validate is that people will deal with dropship, right? And so that opens up the opportunity for shoppable showrooms again, right? There's a lot of conversations. Will consumers do that? Will we lose the impulse buy? But it's not going to be as successful for every category, but for some, really, shoe stores, for example, it's about the fit, right? And so if I can get that solved for and you can have it to my house by the end of the day or by tomorrow, what's the like it's not that likely I need that shoe today, so I'm willing to do it, but now this has become a great experience to solve my pain point around fit. Well, I think we're getting to a place where people are being more open-minded about it. However, Wall Street is highly critical of every experiment that happens. And so brands and retailers are hesitant, especially if they're a publicly traded company, because they're going to be scrutinized for the impact that has to financials today versus, okay, what network effect does that unlock? Maybe that takes a couple of quarters. What is the impact to the halo effect? How has that impacted customer lifetime value, which we really have to get to. And I think the more and more stores integrate technology, then we're going to have more ability to see those insights, to track in-store attribution, and hopefully that will free up the opportunity to do more experimentation.
So because I have to.
Of course, you got to come back. I was going to say that you're going to say it does make sense.
So the problem with Wall Street is we've convinced the world we've convinced everyone that you need growth at all costs, and then that seeps in. And so to use Lee's former employer, the crusade that I've been trying to really attack for the last 2 years is L Brands. I might get the numbers wrong, but they were around here. I think was the 7th and 4th best stock in the S&P for 2020 and 2021. So no matter what, they were in the top 10 2 years in a row. Revenues were down both years. EBIT dollars were up. Because they internalized, you could sell less, charge more, make more money because they had been over discounted and they fixed it. And so the message that I keep trying to convey to people is exactly that. It's build your business. And your business ultimately is your profits. It's not just growing. And I think that the loudest voices are the ones that are trained to think about growth. But at the end of the day, listen, I think about the world in earnings and multiples, right? Because one of them is how happens, and one of them science, one of them's art. And the company is worth the combination of both. L Brands, as the top 10 in S&P, watched its earnings skyrocket, and its multiple didn't budge. So it was still arguably underpriced. But the point is, that's the company's way, that's yours way of giving the finger to Wall Street and saying, I'm going to make more money. You come along if you want to. And ultimately, we have to catch up.
So I think you and I talked about this just last week.
Showroom stores is beyond me why we don't have more of them. I mean, it was mentioned.
Electronic stores. I mean, that's a perfect example there.
Which one?
An electronic store.
Well, Argos, which we saw today, right? Bonobos has been that way. Bonobos was bought by Walmart. The grandson is the smartest one of all. And Who else am I thinking of? I don't know. There's been like 3 or 4. Oh, Best Buy just did a test on it. A test.
Yeah, I'm not
Like
familiar.
after
Small.
How
we
big
did our
was it?
first study on showroom. We've done 2 or 3 of them, and consumers are like, "Let's have it," because it's a perfect integration of technology and experience. You can go and experience a product. Go, yeah, I'll take that. By the way, just ship it to my house. I mean, isn't that what we're shooting for? Smaller real estate, right? Smaller labor, smaller build out. Like everything about it is going to cost less eventually. But you're going to get better experience, and you're going to get better experience all the way around because I don't have to lug this stuff out of the house. So it's beyond me why retailers haven't tried that more often.
Well, so it goes down to the return on investment, right? So we were talking about this earlier. So what's the return on, like how do you demonstrate that, the return on investment of, say, a showroom store? And is it the problem because most all the CEOs are finance guys?
You're going to prove concept a little bit, but I think with like an example of a Best Buy, like an example of a Best Buy, right? And the ecosystem of smart home or the ecosystem around like your sound system. Most people walk in, they've researched one product that they think they want to buy, but they have a big gap to understanding the full ecosystem of products to bring that into their home. And so now if you have a brand experience around, hey, we're your partner, we're going to help you figure out what device you need, what cords you need, all of that, you probably now are going to buy 10 things from me, not just one. And I'm going to be your partner now, not just a brand who sells you products, because it helps you figure all of that out.
Okay.
And that's a lot higher value, and that is where you unlock ROI.
So I guess to get the audience involved, being honest, how many times do you walk into, say, an electronics store and you see it there and you look how much it costs on Amazon and just order it from Amazon to go home? A lot. So I guess that's I guess the challenge too, probably with some of the showroom stores. And obviously for that one too, but I guess maybe in the showroom store you have more control because it'd be more kind of
I think
a better experience because they're.
One thing that we could have been glossing over just now that we should never gloss over is the importance of the associate to physical experience.
Well, yeah.
I think, and you know, to your point, if you had a good associate in a showroom store, they could do all those things. And across the board, I don't think there's been enough emphasis on associates in stores and training associates. Best Buy made a big effort to it and then had a couple of really great years. I think it's catching up with them a little bit, but it's only numbers over numbers, so I'm not really sure. But focusing on associates, considering how easy online shopping is, has got to be a number one.
Well, you know what they need? Suit motherfuckers.
You've been waiting all day to drop.
I've been waiting all day.
Waiting.
I just wanted to say that word on stage.
Yeah.
So, retailtainment, experiential retail, right? So Vince just gave a pretty insightful presentation of what Meow Wolf is, but at the end of the day, even though they have Omega Mart, it's not a retailer, right? It's an experience, it's entertainment. But you know, there of course we talk about experience in retail and kind of where things are going. I know that you've done some research on that. What is your thoughts? You know, it's one thing to talk about a brand like Nike that's got really active community athletes, but for some segments it's not as easy to kind of really create that fandom and get people engaged. Do you believe in that? Do you think that every category can really elevate their experience and get people to be fans, whether it's like an office supply chain versus, a Peloton? Well, Peloton's maybe not the best example.
Dunder Mifflin was a lot of fun.
Yeah, there you go, Dunder Mifflin.
I do think there's an opportunity for it, but it takes homework, and you have to be really purposeful about it and understand who you're trying to attract and the message you're trying to convey. When we were hired once by Amazon Studios, and we did a collaboration with them to create the 1950s incarnation of the Carnegie Deli as a tribute to the Marvelous Mrs. Maisel show. And the Marvelous Mrs. Maisel show had won its first Emmy, so it's still pretty new. And you would think that what caused 6-hour lines was the Marvelous Mrs. Maisel show, but it actually was tapping into the nostalgia of the Carnegie Deli, which if you're from New York City, that is like a staple that no longer exists. And we partnered with the family and were able to bring that back in the most authentic way possible. People showed up in clothes as if they lived in the 1950s. They waited online for 6 hours. We served 11,000 sandwiches. and in return, there was so much more awareness for the Marvelous Mrs. Maisel show that Amazon was doing. But it was all because of what we were able to tap into with the Carnegie Deli. So I do think there's an opportunity. You asked me this office question before, and like, if I was Staples, like, why don't you do The Office? Like, I would go to the store that's The Office and relive that show that was ridiculous, you know, and it's just that connection, that human connection that you create, that is the opportunity. And it like he said with Meow Wolf, it just changes your mindset. You're not just Staples that sells me literally a stapler. Like, you brought me into this world that I got to be a part of. Now I think of you and my relationship with you is different than it was yesterday.
So my question for Vince would have been, not everything has to be disruptive. Like, I think Melissa's talking, like, nostalgia is really powerful. And nostalgia doesn't have to be experiential. Nostalgia could be knowing where the milk is in a grocery aisle, right? It's this notion of certain purchases are mass. Certain purchases are, I need them. And they don't have to be like, butterbeer costs a lot of money. If they shrunk the cost and put it in grocery stores, they'd probably make more money. So it's just figuring out who you want to be and what your goal is. And like, disruption and imagination is fantastic, and that was beautiful for certain products, which I think most people in the room are selling. I don't know that you want to. Disruption is also, it causes pain, right? It causes friction. So certain things could just be like, not everything has to be drastically different.
Sure. Well, I guess I just going back to the whole, you know, we need better experience. We need better experience. As a lot of you know, we produce restaurant spaces, and it's obvious to everyone. There's been a lot more innovation and experimentation in the restaurant industry than there has been in traditional retail. Why is that, Lee?
It's part of their gap. I mean, it's one of the three things, right? It's good service, good food, good experience. Like, right from the beginning. And that's why I think if you do a survey, with most QSR companies, they won't care that much if there's no restaurant at all, because they haven't really been doing the experience part of it all. Their only experience is tactical. They might as well be online anyway and just have a dark box bring it to your house. But restaurants have been ahead of the game since the get-go because they always got the experience part. So the experience starts with the maitre d', let's just say it's full serve. Then it starts at the table. Is everything right? Is the silverware right? There's so many elements of it. They've thought it through for so long that they get it. I mean, I think they're just way ahead when it comes to that. But they're like retailers in that too. The bigger that they get, you know, if you're a Darden person and you've got, like, you know, 1,000 restaurants out there, then that experience is definitely going to come down. The forks get a little bit cheaper, the plates get a little bit cheaper, the lobster gets a little bit cheaper, like on and on and on. But all in all, I think restaurants get it, like, right from the go.
I think as flexible fulfillment continues to expand, though, that is, like, retail can literally learn from QSR. Do you know what I mean? Because these are like these transactional moments that have to be well optimized, but we could still make them brand moments. So curbside, BOPIS, all of that, Boss, it's QSR.
Yeah. So authenticity is just another thing I wanted to hit on there too, and unique designs, right? We'll use restaurants. Like, if you've been in a Sweetgreen, you can tell it's a Sweetgreen, but they have some pretty nice stores. Warby Parker does it, but I know it's not cheap, and I guess we're stamping out a lot of boxes that look the same, right? Vince is excited about it. And I'm going to bring up a slide here from a panelist that was supposed to be on this panel, who put it on LinkedIn the other day, which I thought was pretty interesting. He says, I sometimes miss those signature aesthetics that made a brand stand out. Today, 90% of designs can be mistaken for a Starbucks. And there's the
Nostalgia.
Yeah. Well, this is the nostalgia there, but it's also that everything's starting to look the same.
But that's right, but and Carl, who is fantastic, is flagging it. There's a certain thing about those golden arches with the red that just, it works. Like, I don't like everything looking like a Starbucks, and Starbucks has its own version of nostalgia.
So that is a box.
I guess the point is that McDonald's looks like the new Panera, or looks like
But this happens a lot, right? There's plenty of times that a mood board will cross my desk, and I'm like, if I see another slatted wall, we're not doing it, right? And so you have, like, what is your brand? What is your brand aesthetic? What is your brand emotive message? Right? So I'll say, what are you trying to achieve with this? And then let's figure out what that is for you. Mm-hmm. But this is what happens. People see blanket out there, all these things that are successful, and think, okay, if I slap that on my storefront, I'm also going to be successful. But that's not what your customer is looking for.
You know, to the experience thing that was brought up just a little while ago, I'm going to get this wrong, but he said if you're looking for discovery and experience, it cannot happen without the unknown. And so the problem with retail is it's
Everything's
known.
yeah.
I mean, there isn't a thing that you walk into Walmart, you walk into any store, you know what it is. You walk into an Abercrombie, it's the same thing.
But you know what? I think that's what has made companies like a Supreme that was acquired for $2 billion and Kith and all those guys, because they lean into that. They lean into like the art of the drop. You don't fully know what you're going to expect. You don't want to miss out on that thing that might be there, right? Yeah. And so how can brands and retailers bring a little bit more of that into their in-store
You don't
experience?
even know if you're going to be in line in time.
And you'll wait if you are in line is the thing too.
Yeah.
So looking to the future, again, we started this off saying a crystal ball, which we all would love to have. But what do you see, 10 years down the horizon in terms of physical retail, any major changes? And I guess Tom Goodwin hit on this, doesn't think drones are going to revolutionize delivery. The metaverse is, in his mind, is not something that's going to really change. But do you think differently, or do you think that, that there's going to be a bigger shift over the next decade, or is this going to be incremental kind of change?
I think the purpose of the store is going to continue to evolve. And because as the younger demographic continues to grow up, right, their expectations of these environments are going to change, impact how we need to evolve in the environments that we create. So, but the irony is, even though they're digitally native at birth, have a phone in their hand, what they crave out of the in-store experience is very different. They want to connect with communities. They want to have a sense of discovery. They expect information at their fingertips. They expect to click to buy. That's not where they're going there for. So it's like, how is that going to evolve? And I'm not a fan of the metaverse, but I witnessed for the first time an example of how it could translate. My daughter's 7. She plays Roblox, obsessed with it. She creates her avatars. I took her shopping to Target, Cat and Jack, and almost everything she picked was how her avatar dressed, because that became her muse for how she wanted to look in life. And so it's really just understanding how those two worlds connect becomes the opportunity.
Well, and I want to go back to what you're saying, like generations, because there's research, right, saying that Gen Zs want to be in the moment. You and I discussed this last week. But is it true, though, like that they want to be in a store more than other generations, or is that just them saying that? Like, we really want to be connected, but at the end of the day, they're going to want to shop online.
They want to be in it for different reasons, though. They want to be in it for that sense of discovery. They want to be in it because they have a sense of community. They have this, they gravitate to brands who help them serve a greater purpose. So that's why they don't want to just hear you're into sustainability. They want to know, okay, well, how are you helping me be part of that movement, to be part of change? So they want different things out of it. And that's
what if it's an office supply company? What's the movement to change?
They may or may not understand the office. I don't know.
I think there's going to be a great bifurcation.
Well, you guys have done research on, right? Like what the different generations.
Yeah. Well,
I'm glad we're still not talking about millennials now. Right?
So we did it in different generations. The footfalls have gone in malls, have gone precipitously down over the last 9 years, almost 60%. So whereas you had 100 people in a mall, now you got 40 people in a mall. So even if the percentage of that is 50% Gen Z, it's still way the heck smaller. And I still go back to the statement, like, what's the unknown that I'm going to find there? When I have everything in my phone, just about everything is unknown. Even today's scores are unknown, but I got it right here. So it's going to be different, I think, altogether. But I think there's going to be there already is a bifurcation in that those that are doing good, usually very big. I did some numbers the other day, and Amazon, Walmart, and Costco do almost 40% of all retail revenue. If you take out the people that I mentioned before, the gasoline and cars and restaurants.
I think it's going to be hard to supplant big. And I think until we get the next VC cycle, it's going to be hard to create small. Yeah. So I think like it was for the past decade, it was two sides, right? It was large, it was big and small because the big kept getting bigger and the small kept getting profitless funding. And that stopped. So now it's going to be the big have this great opportunity to keep getting bigger, and we'll see what happens there. So I think it'll be interesting. I mean, like when I think about retail, I like to think about we have this view that it's a zero-sum game, But I think it's a social contract. And I think that if you think about the retailers that win holistically, I'll go barbell. I'll say there is a P&L that needs to be spent, and the question is who's paying for it. So if you're a luxury business, the implicit agreement, the social contract, is that the consumer pays all your COGS, right? You charge them whatever you want, they'll pay it up. In response, you give them champagne, you give them Fifth Avenue flagship stores, you give them glossy advertisements. You're paying the OpEx. So what do? You get the highest gross margin in the business, the highest SG&A in the business, the highest margin. It's great. On the other side of the spectrum, you go discounters. I'm the consumer, I'm not paying a dime of your COG. You own the COG, but I'll pay all the OpEx. Why? Because you just roll out a rack at TJX and I'll be your customer. I'll be your employee. I'll pick, pack, ship, fulfill it myself. So all you need, what you have there is the lowest gross margin in the business. You have the lowest SG&A in the business, and you don't have LVMH level margins, but you've got the second highest in the business. So it's this idea of if you're in a zero-sum game, if you're a department store and you're fighting because the customer says, I want the discount, and you say, well, I'm not giving you the service, yeah, that's where you get killed.
Yeah.
But if you can actually come to an agreement, if the customer knows why they're shopping and you know why you have your customer, whatever industry, that's where the beauty, that's where the magic happens.
Yeah.
Well, I think that where do you provide value at the end? That's basically what you're getting down to, right? Like, if you're creating value, then they will spend more. Then they will come more often. Then they will be more loyal. But what people consider value will vary. What's value at the dollar store is very different than like at REI.
They don't count.
For example. Yeah.
But I think to Melissa's point, and about Gen Z and Y in general, what I've noticed, and there's been a few restaurants that open in town and a few retailers, they get to like 2 or 3, and the AUV is off the charts, like $4 million for a restaurant. They're taking home, I don't know, 15% of that, 20% every year, 3 or 4 restaurants. They're good. They're happy. So you think about the generational differences. I think there it is in spades. It's like, I'm in Columbus, Ohio. I don't care. I've got 6 restaurants. I'm pulling down like $400,000 from each one. I'm good. Whereas back in the day, in the 80s, you would have gone, I want like 52 of those things in the state of California and 42 of them in New York. It's just a different ballgame. So that's what I'm talking about with bifurcation. You've got these guys that are really, really good on a local, smaller basis. They could be in a mall, doesn't really matter. And they're very happy with a higher quality product. And then if you just want some, toothpaste or whatever the heck you want, you're gonna go to the big guys and get that, and you're gonna get it in 12 hours or less.
So you're giving a talk tomorrow on resale, and you believe that that's something that's, I guess, can solve a lot of...
Are you guys gonna be hungover tomorrow? I'll tell you, I'll give you the results now, and then none of us have to show up.
No, don't give it away. You gotta get them to show up tomorrow.
That's like the best retail spaces you ever went to. But so we did a study on used because I'm fascinated by used. It was billions of dollars, and they're talking about billions more, and ThreadUp and all these guys online, Poshmark and Depop, and just on and on. Plus, I think it's a huge business for Facebook and for eBay, which it always has been for eBay, right? I'm going to put that up there, and then you're going to buy it for whatever. But anyway, we asked consumers, would you visit a physical store more often if they had a used area? So we asked them department stores, specialty stores, hardware stores, 8 different types of retail, and the numbers were off the charts for every single one of them. And we asked them why, and it's like, well, it's price during a recession. I think you would think that would be the number one thing. I shouldn't even ask. And but other than that, it was fun. It was fun to hunt. They didn't really care. They went with friends and all kinds of stuff. So it's a major factor in retail. They would visit more stores more often. So if you want to increase footfalls in a store, or any kind of store, a hardware store, just have used merchandise.
So
I think that's the
like
thing,
TJX.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I was going to say it's like TJX. It's the experience because you're going to go in. You're not going to. You're going to looking for a deal.
The best thing
the
TJ,
thrill.
go for it.
It's the thrill of it. Like,
Yeah,
and that's
you're
why
gonna
it's
find
important.
the
Not
unknown.
one answer fits all. Like in that mind, it's like the thrill of the hunt. And I found something. We did the real. We did their first 3 locations.
They're great.
And then they
love them.
And then they opened their first permanent in New York, and it was too fancy. It was too, they actually didn't perform as well, and they had to reorganize it because in the first 3 locations, that hunt of what I was going to find for her was what got her excited to be there. And you can't strip that out if that's what people are craving in that environment.
Yeah. I have 2 young girls, and they're obsessed with
100%.
They want
3
vintage
Gen
stores,
Zs,
and
100%.
I go with them, and I'm like, all right, I'll actually come along. Like, I'm in there now, like, finding old band T-shirts and stuff like that, which,
I read the blurb. I think what you're going to talk about is going to be the profitability, because that's the biggest question. Because it's a very hard business to do. It's a very unit economic intensive business.
So yeah, as it turns out, which is even better, when you do it online, it's way less profitable than when you do it in the store.
yeah.
So then teaching your people how to do it in a store is the thing. Like your sellers become buyers.
Well, you got to save it, some of this. For
Yeah, okay,
tomorrow.
we're
I thought
done.
that's what I was doing for you.
Yeah. He was trying to help you out there.
I didn't expect he was going to go with it. I was just letting you.
15 minutes.
Spoiler alert. So we're coming up on time here. I guess just to wrap things up, and I'll go to Simeon last on this one. Similar to what Jason did in the discussion earlier, I know we're talking about some of the challenges, but what excites you when you think about the future of physical retail?
Oh, kind of everything. I think it's an awesome time to be in retail. Like what is it? I mean, obviously there's this behemoth. I don't have where is my phone? Oh, I left it back with yours. Everything that you could want is right there. But isn't that boring? That's the most boring thing ever. But so where am I going to go? And then when I go there, why is it good? Why do I like it? Why do I get that emotional thing about it? And then how do you recreate that? And then do you even want to scale, or do you want to be like some of those guys in Columbus, Ohio? I got 4, I'm good. I don't want any more. I think it's a super exciting time to try and figure that delta out. Like, where exactly are we, and how is it going to work? Is it just going to all be online? And if that's the case, it'll be the most boring decade ever.
Melissa, what
I
excites?
hope not.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I think what is exciting is that a lot of what happened over the past 3 years forced people to experiment and take chances and run pilots. And I think that the more, from a experience standpoint, the more that we have data and we have information that we can literally put in the hands of the store associates, the more that the experience is going to be of value. And I think that's part of what is exciting. I should walk into a store and they know me and they know what I've bought in the past, or they understand what I'm looking for. They can help me in a deeper way. So I think that's one. And then also leaning into the store, having a story. We've seen that in the past, but I think you're starting to see it more now as a priority when you approach store design. So I think bringing those 2 aspects together are things that I'm excited about.
Exciting. And Simeon, I got different questions for you.
What? I was so excited for that question.
If you were to pick one stock that we should all buy right now.
Oh, yeah. That's a good question.
Outlook just on the kind of the current market and retail. And I guess, are we heading into a recession?
Do I have a whole session to have that conversation?
No, we've
I
got 60
negative
seconds. We're already over time.
Listen, I think that, and it'll partially address that question, I could not be, odd coming from the cynical Wall Street guy, but I could not be more excited for retail because of this theme of nostalgia. I think that in 2001, or from 99 to 2001, we had the exact same thing that just happened right now. And then once it popped, what happened? It was the best decade of retail, the best. Once people start getting excited about all the disruption, they forget about the core. Once the disruption evaporates, they remember, shit, it's a really good business. 4 walls, margins, they work, right? It scales really well. I think we're about to see that again. I think, and whether it's from all the ones that had the money, all the digital natives coming back in, like, it is a good time to run a store. It is a good time to have a wholesale business that sells other people's brands. Because now people are going to realize that the flash, the excitement, if it doesn't bear fruit, if it doesn't give you profits, it's not worth doing. And you decide if you want to have your 4 restaurants, or you decide if you want to have the pop-ups, or if you decide you want, like, whatever it is, you're allowed to do it now. So that's point number 1. To get there is going to take some time. So to address your question, we just went through, I think we took 5 companies public in 2 months last summer. Like, that's a lot, like, for that 2-month period. And all those stocks have collapsed, right? All SPACs have collapsed.
Yeah.
Retail's gone through its thing. Like, it does this. So I think broadly for the market, and again, this is a much longer conversation that I'll synthesize into how long it took Lee to introduce himself, is you need to know that there's going to be these multiples. That's not your earnings. Focus on your earnings. You'll get through the other side, and the multiples will work. So if you have a good project and the ROI is going to be there, do it. Even if it means the next 6 months, you are pressure on your stock.
Yeah.
That's where I think we're going to be. I think 23 is going to be great. I think that there's this huge rhetoric out there about high income versus low income because it's very easy, and there's a whole conversation we need to get into. People bought a lot of shit last year.
Yeah.
Let them work their way through it. They're going to buy more once the replenishment happens, and know where your replenishment arc sits, and people will come back. 23, I think there's going to be demand. I think just get through the next few months.
I think everybody in this audience is happy to hear you say that. So thank you guys so much. And thank you guys for sitting through our discussion.